Hi, my name's Delphine. I spent 6 years raising my sister's daughter. Every bottle, every fever, every night she cried for someone who wasn't there. Then one day, out of nowhere, my sister came back. She walked into my home like she still owned it, and into our lives like she hadn't missed a single birthday. And at her wedding, while I stood holding the child I raised, her fiancé's father looked right at me and said, "Miss, can we get more champagne over here?" They didn't see me as family. They saw me as help. But what hurts more, they planned it that way. So why did she really come back? And what was she willing to erase to reclaim a title she walked away from? They say the worst betrayals aren't loud. They whisper. That night in Austin, the air was heavy, not with noise, but with a kind of silence that made my skin itch. Spring had just cracked open, humid, restless, like something about to break. Our block was quiet, the kind of stillness that usually calms people, but it made my chest tighten. I remember the hum of the ceiling fan above me, the soft ticking of the old thermostat, and then the baby cried. It wasn't the usual hungry fuss. It was sharp, urgent, different. I rolled out of bed barefoot, cold wood creaking under me. The crib was by the window. But Malis, my sister, wasn't in the room. Her purse was gone. No shoes by the door. No movement in the bathroom. Just that damn crying. There was a note on the kitchen counter, torn from the edge of her planner. Crooked handwriting, smudged at the edge. It said, "I can't do this. Please raise her. I know you will. Nothing else." I remember staring at it for a long time, thinking, this was a prank. A test. I opened every cabinet, pulled the curtains back, checked the closet. Her hospital bag was gone. The formula container was half empty. I picked up the baby. She stopped crying the second I did. I sank into the couch with her in my arms, holding her close, not because I was ready, but because I was all she had. I was 19, barely holding on to college, working at a campus bookstore part-time, living off rice and frozen peas, and in 1 second, I became a mother. I called Malis's phone, straight to voicemail, again. By the third call, my hands stopped shaking. I tried her Instagram, account deleted. Her email bounced back. She didn't just leave the baby, she left her name behind too. I wanted to scream, wanted to call the cops, drive downtown, shake someone by the collar and yell, "My sister disappeared and left me a newborn." But instead, I called in sick to work. I emailed my professor, told him I'd missed the midterm. Then, I made a bottle. She drank it slowly, staring up at me with those gray eyes. There was no fight, no goodbye, just a switch flipped, and she vanished. By morning, the neighborhood had caught the scent. I opened the door to check the mail and found Sharon from across the street smiling too sweetly. "Morning, Delphine. How's that little one doing? Yours, right? I always thought—" She trailed off, fake laughed. The mailman looked at me like I was someone new. At the grocery store, a woman with a baby sling glanced at me and said, "Takes guts to do it so young." At church that Sunday, the lady in the third pew offered to pray for single moms doing their best. I wasn't a mom. I wasn't supposed to be. But try explaining that to people who've already decided. I became the story they whispered over barbecues. One afternoon, while folding tiny socks, I stood in front of the mirror. The baby was asleep on my chest. But her name on the hospital bracelet had faded. No middle name. Just Baby Girl Rowe. I whispered, "Aurelia." It came out soft, like a promise. Malis had always been good at escaping. Even as kids, she'd hide behind the garage for hours when chores came up. She left the moment things got hard, and somehow everyone forgave her for it. This time, the consequences had a heartbeat. I didn't choose this, but I won't let her grow up abandoned twice. I taped the note to the inside of the kitchen cabinet where I wouldn't see it every day, but I needed to know it was there. Proof that I didn't hallucinate the decision. That night, I sang her to sleep with a lullaby I barely remembered from our childhood. She drooled on my shoulder. Her tiny fingers curled into the fabric of my shirt like she'd already chosen me, no matter what the world said. I whispered into the dim room, "It's just you and me now." Then my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number. Voicemail. Hi, this is Capital First. We're calling regarding unusual activity on Malis Row's credit card. You're listed as the secondary contact. I stared at the phone. My throat dry. Why the hell would I be the secondary contact? There's a kind of silence that hums, low, steady, unnerving. Not the peaceful kind, but the type that lets you know you're being watched. In our neighborhood, people didn't need facts to form conclusions. They just needed your front porch light to stay on one night longer than usual. After the bank call, I stayed up for hours, phone face down, laptop glowing. I scrolled through everything I could remember about Malis's financial accounts. I didn't have passwords, but I had access once. Long enough ago that it should have been revoked. But here we were. The next morning, I made pancakes for Aurelia. She clapped her hands when I flipped one without breaking it. She was nearly 1 now, walking clumsily, babbling constantly. My days blurred into formula stains and lullabies, and any trace of the girl who'd once aced biology exams felt fictional. A week later, I was back at the university office, sitting across from my counselor, a woman named June, who had a jar of peppermint sticks and a framed quote behind her desk. Success is not linear. I remember thinking whoever wrote that hadn't changed diapers at 3 a.m. So, Delphine, she said gently, have you decided about the scholarship? I nodded, too fast. I'll defer for a semester. Just need a little time. She smiled politely, wrote something down. Totally understandable. The program will still be here. That was the last time I set foot on campus. Over the next few days, I boxed up my textbooks, canceled my dorm room, and withdrew from classes. I emailed professors goodbye like I was going on some grand gap year. I wasn't. I was going to the grocery store with coupons and Googling how to treat diaper rash. Every great sacrifice starts with a small lie, mostly to yourself. When Aurelia's first birthday rolled around, I tried to make it feel like something. I baked a lopsided cake, strung up dollar store balloons, and printed photos of her, bundled in a swaddle, trying mashed peas, curled up on my chest. I had this idea to make a memory frame, one that had labels for each milestone. Under Mom, I paused. Should I put my picture there? Leave it blank? Use a photo of Malis, if I could even find one? Eventually, I slid the frame into a drawer and walked away. Some stories don't need captions. Later that week, while waiting at checkout with wipes and a box of teething crackers, the cashier glanced between me and Aurelia. She's adorable. Got your eyes, she said, smiling just a bit too tight. I smiled back. Thanks. She scanned the next item, then added, Teen moms are a different kind of brave. Outside, I sat in the car with the engine off. Aurelia kicked her feet in the car seat, humming to herself. She didn't understand the weight of other people's assumptions, how they sneak under your skin and stay there. At church that Sunday, a woman asked if I'd joined the young mothers support group. I said no. She tilted her head like I was the problem. Later that afternoon, I folded laundry in the living room while Aurelia napped. Baby onesies, burp cloths, socks the size of 2 fingers. It was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional bark from the neighbor's terrier. No one's coming to save us, I whispered to the pile of cotton and polyester. But we're still here. There's a quote I read once that stuck with me. Strong people don't put others down. They lift them up. Quietly. I thought about that often. Especially when I saw how loud people could be with their silence. Around that time, I reconnected with Noah, a girl I'd known from high school. She showed up with hand-me-downs and granola bars and didn't ask a single invasive question, just helped unpack a bag of donated baby clothes and sat beside me on the porch, sipping lemonade. That kind of presence is rare. At one evening, as I was putting Aurelia down for the night, she reached for my finger and held it, like it was her anchor. I stared at the ceiling and tried to picture what the next year might look like. More formula, more whispered judgment, maybe. But also more steps, more words, more reminders of why I chose to stay. The phone rang again. Same number. Hi, this is Capital First again, the voice said. You're still listed as the secondary account holder. There's been activity, unusual charges. We just wanted to confirm. I stood there in the hallway, phone pressed to my ear, heart picking up speed. There's been activity? From a woman who left no forwarding address, deleted every trace of herself, and disappeared without a word? I looked down the hall to the crib, then back at the kitchen table where her note still lived, folded, yellowed, taped under the drawer, and suddenly, the silence I'd been surviving in cracked. You don't realize how much unfinished business someone leaves behind until their shadow shows up in your bank records. The second I heard that voicemail from Capital First, something cold settled in my stomach. Not panic, just clarity. Malis wasn't gone. Not really. That Thursday, I left work early to pick up Aurelia from daycare. She always ran into my arms like I was the center of her universe, and for 6 years I had been. But that afternoon, her teacher hesitated before opening the gate. She had a visitor today, she said cautiously. My heart stuttered. Who? I didn't catch a name, but she said she was family, didn't stay long. As I turned to leave, I saw it, parked down the street, sleek black sedan, windows tinted too dark for any normal person, and then the driver's side door opened, and there she was, Malis, perfect hair, expensive perfume, heels too high for Austin sidewalks. She looked like a Pinterest version of herself. And just like that, the air left my lungs. You look, I said, trying to find a word that wasn't a weapon. Different. She smiled, unfazed. Well, I've had time to find myself. She walked up like we'd seen each other last week, not 6 years ago when she vanished into thin air and left her daughter crying in my arms. I'm just here for the weekend, she said. Wanted to reconnect. Thought maybe we could talk? Talk? I echoed. About what? She tilted her head, like I was the difficult one. Family, closure, us. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I was too stunned to react. We drove home in silence. Aurelia babbled from the back seat, unaware. I kept glancing at Malis in the mirror, half wondering if I was hallucinating her. I unlocked the door and motioned her inside like I was inviting a neighbor to borrow sugar, not the woman who abandoned us. You can take the couch, I said, flat. That's fine, she said. It's just a night or two. That night, I pretended to sleep on the other side of the house. Around midnight, I heard her voice through the hallway, phone on speaker, laughter too loud. She's still raising her like it's hers, she said. I sat up in bed, blood pulsing in my ears. Still? Like I hadn't patched diapers with duct tape, like I hadn't fed that child when the lights were off and the fridge was empty. Flashbacks hit me fast, pacing with a teething baby on my hip, eating cereal with water, cutting my own hair with kitchen scissors while she screamed in the next room. You can't reclaim what you've already abandoned to rot. The next morning, I made scrambled eggs while Aurelia colored at the table. Malis floated into the kitchen like a guest at a resort. She reached for a plate and sat beside Aurelia like nothing had happened. Good morning, baby girl, she cooed. Aurelia looked up, confused. She leaned closer to me, her crayon frozen in the air. Mommy, who is that lady? Malis blinked. I'm your mommy, sweetheart. Aurelia's body tensed. Her little arms reached around me. No, mommy's right here. The room went still. I didn't flinch. I cut another piece of toast, placed it on her plate. It's okay, I said softly. She just needs time. Malis's face tightened for a second, then she smiled too brightly. Kids say the funniest things. That afternoon, I went to fold laundry and found a preschool enrollment form on the counter. Half filled, signed in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. My name wasn't on it. Hers was. She had even listed a new address. And that was when the pieces clicked. She wasn't here to reconnect. She was here to reclaim, to erase me with polite words and perfume and paper trails. I looked out the window as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops. The air was still, quiet, but no one shows up this polished unless they're here to claim something. There's a specific feeling that creeps in when someone starts rearranging things in your house like they own the lease. It doesn't scream. It doesn't slam doors. It moves silently, like a perfume bottle on the bathroom shelf that wasn't there yesterday, or a purse tossed on the kitchen counter that doesn't belong to you. That's when you realize they're not just visiting. I came downstairs and saw Malis standing barefoot in front of my fridge, drinking almond milk from the carton. She had left the door open, letting out cold air, like bills didn't exist. You know, she said, Your fridge is organized exactly like Mom's used to be. Weird, right? She looked at me over her shoulder like she was complimenting me. Like this was a bonding moment. I didn't respond, just reached for the kettle and turned it on. I was thinking of cooking dinner tonight, something nice. Randolph's flying in. It might be good for him to see how well we all get along. I set the mug down slower than necessary. We all? You, me, Aurelia, Grandma, the people who matter. Then she smiled and added, it'll be good for the story. The story. The one where she didn't abandon her child but graciously allowed her little sister to help during a hard phase. Later that afternoon, I stopped by Lois's house to drop off some baby clothes Aurelia had outgrown. She was folding linen napkins for the dinner Malis had just volunteered us for. She's doing well, isn't she? Lois said, almost to herself. She's still her mother after all, and now she's marrying into a family that actually has standing. You should be proud of her. Supportive. I felt my stomach turn. You think she came back to be a mother? She came back. That says something, Lois replied, as if showing up with clean clothes erased 6 years of silence. I didn't know blood could be this transactional, I murmured, more to myself than her. She didn't hear me, or pretended not to. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who edit you out of the story first. The next morning, I stopped by Aurelia's school to update her emergency contact. The front desk clerk gave me that look, tight smile, too polite. I'm sorry, she said. There's been a change in guardianship documentation. We received new paperwork last week. You're no longer listed as the primary contact. I stood there, blinking once. Could you fax me that paperwork? I asked evenly. I'd like to review the signatures. Of course, she said, trying not to meet my eyes. I walked back to my car in silence. Didn't cry, didn't yell. I just drove home with the air conditioning off and the windows down, because I needed something to hit me in the face harder than this moment already had. She wasn't just back. She was playing to win. By 6 o'clock that evening, Milas was setting out cloth napkins for the dinner. Lois was directing where the glasses should go. I was handed a serving spoon and told to make myself useful. Randolph arrived 15 minutes late in a crisp button-down and the kind of watch that says you don't check time, you own it. This must be the sister, he said, shaking my hand without looking at me. I'm Delphine, I answered. Right, you're the one who helped out while Malis was transitioning. He used the word like she'd been moving apartments, not disappearing from an infant's life. No one corrected him. Halfway through the meal, a guest I didn't know leaned over and asked, So, do you run the house? I stared at her. No, I built the house Malis is decorating. It got real quiet after that. After everyone left, I headed to my room, ready to breathe in a space I could still call mine. But something was off. Aurelia's toy box was moved, shifted across the room, and stacked with books that weren't hers. I didn't ask who touched it, I just dragged it back into place. You don't get to shift memories just because you reappeared in makeup and heels. The next morning, the mail brought a stack of letters. Tucked between a utility bill and a supermarket flyer was an envelope from Aurelia's school. I opened it casually, until I saw the words change of address request across the top. Malis's handwriting. Again. That morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity you only get when sleep doesn't quite reach you. I wasn't surprised to hear the faint clang of pans downstairs. But I was surprised to see Malis in my robe. My robe. The same one I bought when Aurelia first got sick and I had to sleep on the couch for 3 nights straight. There's oat milk in the fridge, she said casually. I figured I'd make French toast. She didn't ask, didn't pause, just took the kitchen like it had always been hers. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. There's nothing louder than someone quietly reclaiming space they never earned, I muttered. That afternoon, she asked me to join her at a wedding venue downtown. She'd scheduled a meeting with the planner and thought it would be fun if I tagged along. Besides, she added with a smile, you've got an eye for practical things. I almost laughed. The cafe was trendy, overpriced, and smelled like citrus oil and new wood. When we walked in, the planner, a young woman named Avery, stood and shook Malis's hand eagerly. Then she turned to me. This must be the assistant? Before I could correct her, Melis answered, "Yes, my sister. She's helping with logistics." I froze, lips curled in something that tried to pass for polite. My eyes met Melis's, and she blinked like she didn't understand the problem. The planner dove into fabric swatches and centerpiece options while my ears rang. I wasn't helping. I was holding everything up while she disappeared. 3 days later, we were at the bridal boutique. I trailed behind as Melis fluttered through racks of flower girl dresses. Her voice was sugary, light. "Not this one, it's too much tulle," she said. "This one's perfect, simple, less distracting." She held up a pale cream dress. It was plain, no lace, no ribbon, no shimmer. "That's not like the other ones," I said, eyeing the matching sets she'd already picked for the other girls. Melis shrugged. I didn't want her to feel overwhelmed. She's not used to this kind of crowd. It hit me like a slap to the back of the head. She wasn't just minimizing Aurelia's outfit, she was minimizing Aurelia, just like she'd been slowly erasing me, making both of us smaller, easier to ignore. That night, after Aurelia was asleep and the dishwasher hummed in the background, I sat down across from Melis at the kitchen table. "I raised her," I said. "Every bottle, every diaper, every nightmare. Mine. I have every legal right to challenge you." She didn't flinch, just leaned back, arms crossed. "But you haven't. Why not?" I stared at her. "Because I wanted peace. But don't mistake that for permission." Her smirk faded, just a little. I stood up and walked out. The next day, I dug out the plastic storage box from the closet, the one I hadn't touched in over a year. I spent hours organizing everything: pediatrician bills, daycare receipts, birthday party photos, school forms, every tiny proof that I'd been there when no one else was. I labeled the folder, "Custody Preparation." I didn't need to scream, I just needed to be ready. As I closed the file, a photo slipped loose from between the papers. I picked it up. It was Aurelia, maybe 4 months old, asleep in a pink beanie I'd crocheted during one of those long nights with a colicky infant. On the back, in Melis's handwriting, were 2 words: "For now." No, not for now. Temporary. She had written, temporary. Some moments don't break you, they sharpen you. That was the thought running through my mind as I buttoned up my blouse for the pre-wedding reception Melis had orchestrated like a PR campaign. She was everywhere that day, laughing, posing, charming. I blended in so well, even the hired staff looked more distinct than I did. I was near the drinks table, fixing a crooked napkin stack, when I heard a voice behind me. "Could you bring us a refill, miss?" I turned slowly. Randolph. Melis's future father-in-law stood with 2 guests beside him, all holding half-empty glasses and smug expressions. For a second, I thought he might have mistaken me for someone else. He hadn't. The chuckle from one of his friends confirmed it. A soft roll of laughter. Polite, mean. Melis stood just a few feet away, watching. She didn't flinch, didn't correct him. She just smiled, sipped her wine, and looked right through me. I stepped closer to their table, set my glass down. "Actually," I said, voice even, "I built the life she's standing on." Randolph blinked. "Pardon?" "You asked if I worked here. I don't. I raised her daughter. I kept the lights on, paid every bill while she reinvented herself on some beach or in someone else's bed. I honestly don't know, but you can keep your refill." I walked away before they could recover. Behind me, the room buzzed like a shaken beehive. They wanted quiet, but now they'd get precision. Later that night, Aurelia crawled into my lap, unusually quiet. She traced a line on my shirt with her finger before whispering, "Why did that man say you work there?" I cupped her face gently. "Because sometimes, people don't know what they're really looking at." She blinked at me, then nodded like she understood something bigger than she could put into words. Melis had set up a guest room for her upstairs. Fancy sheets, plush toys still tagged. That night, Aurelia refused to sleep in it. She clung to my arm with a fierceness I hadn't seen since she was 3. "No one will take you without going through me," I whispered into her hair. After she fell asleep, I found Melis in the kitchen polishing glasses that didn't belong to her. "You could have corrected him," I said. She didn't turn around. It wasn't the right time to make things awkward. You let your future father-in-law humiliate me to protect your story, I said. Let's call it what it is. She looked up then, eyes cold. He doesn't need to know our messy history. That's convenient, I said, for you. We didn't speak again that night. At 2 a.m., I opened my laptop, pulled out the folder labeled Custody Preparation, scanned documents, updated names, cross-checked court requirements, every form, every timestamp. I printed a petition template, opened a new email to my attorney, saved it as draft. If they wanted me invisible, I'd make sure the judge saw every receipt. By morning, I had a pile of legal files on the desk, organized, dated, bound. I didn't need to scream, I just needed to move. An hour later, as I was cleaning out Aurelia's school binder, a new message pinged on my phone. No sender, just a subject line, she's not done. Attached was a scanned document titled, Custody Adjustment, Petition by Malis Rowe. You don't have to scream to make war. Sometimes you just have to stop folding the napkins. The air in that house had shifted. Where there used to be tension disguised as tolerance, now there was open hostility, masked with smiles, of course, but the kind that came with knives underneath. The family slideshow event was supposed to be a light-hearted pre-wedding celebration. Candlelight, catered hors d'oeuvres, sentimental music, people in pastel-colored linen sipping wine and pretending they liked each other. I stood at the back, watching the screen as images of Malis's childhood floated by. Her with a ribbon in her hair, her at summer camp. Then, one of her holding baby Aurelia in the hospital, barely 2 hours after delivery. The screen faded into a recorded voice. Being a mother was always part of my destiny, Malis's voice said, polished and soft. I looked down. Aurelia, sitting 2 chairs away, had frozen. She turned to me, her eyes wide. I don't want to watch this, she whispered. She slid out of her chair and disappeared toward the restroom. I followed, found her standing by the sink, arms folded, tears pooling silently. Why did she say that? She asked. You're my mommy. I crouched beside her and wiped her cheeks. She said it because she wants people to believe it. But words don't make a mother. Love does. Aurelia buried her face in my neck and didn't let go for a long time. The next day, a letter from the school district arrived. I opened it, expecting routine paperwork. What I found made my skin flush cold. The guardianship records had been updated. The primary guardian listed, Malis Rowe. I hadn't signed anything, hadn't authorized anything. I called the school office immediately. This is Delphine Trent, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There's been a mistake in my niece's records. Let me check. Yes, the receptionist said cheerily. That paperwork came through last week. All in order. I leaned on the counter, fingers gripping the edge. Can you please send me copies of what was submitted? I never signed off on any changes. Sure, we'll fax it this afternoon. I hung up slowly. My hands were trembling. They were trying to steal her from the paperwork up. That evening, I pulled out every document I'd ever kept. Immunization records, doctor visit notes, school communications. I scanned them all, dated them, logged them. Noah came over with coffee and her old laptop, sat beside me, and said nothing. We just worked. A quiet, methodical rhythm. She helped me build a timeline, list every expense, every custody-relevant moment, down to school pickup logs and pediatrician receipts. You sure you want to go through with this? She asked. Not sure I have a choice anymore, I said. Malis invited Randolph over for brunch again. I didn't attend. Let them sit with the empty chair I used to fill. Let them wonder why it suddenly felt colder without me there to carry the temperature. 2 days later, I met with the lawyer. He skimmed my folder, nodded at the thick stack. Possession isn't 9/10 of the law when we have 6 years of documentation. I folded my arms. Then let's make sure the court sees all of it. He didn't smile, but he did push his glasses up and say, It's going to be a lot of noise. I can handle noise, I said. It's the silence that cost me too much. That night, I went looking for the backup USB to store our files. I opened the drawer in the hallway where we kept cards and invitations. There it was, A cream envelope with golden trim, one of the formal wedding invites, addressed to Randolph Rowe. Underneath it, in light pencil, faded but still legible, was my name, scribbled out. They hadn't just removed me from the seating chart, they'd erased me from the story. There's only so long you can bite your tongue before it starts to bleed. I stared at the sun through the kitchen window that morning, coffee growing cold in my hand. The house was dressed for war in disguise, flower arrangements on every surface, caterers in and out, Malis giving orders like she was directing a military parade. But the real battle had already started. My phone buzzed again. Same hidden sender as before. No subject line this time. Just an attachment. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a PDF titled Custody Addendum, Section 3. I clicked, scrolled. Page 3. A clause stating that I, Delphine Trent, would no longer have unsupervised access to Aurelia once the wedding was formalized. I read it twice, then a third time. You don't try to erase someone unless they were a real threat, I whispered. I forwarded the file to my attorney, then printed 12 hard copies. Noah helped me staple each one, neat, tight, precise. She glanced at me. You sure about this? I'm past sure, I said. I'm done playing polite. We went over my folder again. Immunization records, daycare drop-offs, birthday party receipts. I had unwittingly kept the kind of evidence most people don't even think to collect because I thought I was building a life. Turns out, I'd been preparing a case. I wasn't raising her out of pity, I said. I was building proof without knowing. That evening was the pre-wedding rehearsal dinner. It was held in a rented hall downtown, covered in blush pink and gold details, like someone had emptied a wedding catalog and glued it to the walls. Malis stood in the center, radiant, polished, smiling too wide. She raised a glass. I wouldn't be who I am today without my family's grace and support. I took one breath, then stood. And which part of your family raised your daughter while you reinvented yourself? The room dropped 20 degrees. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "What?" Randolph turned his head toward me. What is she talking about? I walked slowly to the table, pulled one of the folders from my purse. This is who raised her, I said, placing it in front of him. And who's still raising her? Malis froze. The color in her face flickered. You're making this about you, she said, trying to laugh it off. You've always needed attention. I stepped forward. I don't need attention. I need accountability. She tried to pivot, smiling to the guests. We've had our differences, but this is a celebration. No, this is a reckoning. I turned to the crowd. For 6 years, I raised her child, paid for school, stayed up with her fevers. She was gone. She made choices, and I made sacrifices. Randolph stood slowly. He picked up the folder, opened it, and read in silence. The room pulsed with tension. Lois sat stiff in her chair, lips thin. Malis slammed her glass down. This is not the time. I looked straight at her. It never is, until it's too late. Aurelia, from the corner of the room, slipped her hand into mine. She looked up with wide eyes. You're not in trouble, right? She whispered. No, baby, I whispered back. I'm doing what's right. Malis stormed out. The door echoed behind her like the final drum of a funeral procession. The room didn't move for a moment. Then someone got up and walked toward me, then another. Randolph closed the folder. We'll talk, he said simply. Lois didn't say a word, but she didn't look at Malis when she returned 10 minutes later, either. I stepped outside for air. The street was dark, lit by string lights swaying in the wind. A black car pulled up. The window rolled down. It was Randolph. You need to come with me, he said quietly. Now, there's something I didn't know. When powerful men get quiet, it's never a good sign. But as Randolph drove in silence, hands tight on the steering wheel, I didn't feel fear. I felt something that sat deeper. Anticipation. We didn't speak until he pulled into a narrow parking spot outside his office building. Not a house, not a restaurant. A place where deals happened and truths got processed behind glass doors and thick blinds. He turned off the engine but didn't get out. Instead, he reached into the console and pulled out a folded printout. Handed it to me without a word. It was the guest list for the wedding. Finalized version, printed by the venue team. I scanned down the names: Lois, Damien, a dozen rows. My name was gone. "I got this 2 days ago," he said quietly. "You were on the original version. First page." "Because I wasn't meant to be seen," I said. "Only used." He exhaled slowly, leaned back. "Did she really leave for 6 years?" I nodded. "And I stayed." He looked at the list again like it betrayed him personally. Then he pulled out another folder, thicker, tabbed, with highlighted sections. She called this her education legacy, said it was part of the bridal registry for future family planning, a scholarship fund for Aurelia. I flipped to the second tab, boarding school brochures, application forms, a line item labeled Post-Honeymoon Placement, Ridgeview Academy. My chest went cold. She didn't want to raise her. She just wanted to remove her from the story. Randolph sat in still silence as if bracing himself. "She told us you were her cousin. Said she got overwhelmed after the birth and you helped out. Temporarily." I handed him my folder, the one I carried in my bag like a shield. Inside, custody statements, immunization records, signed notes from doctors and teachers, 6 years of documentation that didn't lie, didn't polish anything, didn't pretend. "This," I said, "is what temporary looks like after 6 years." He flipped through each section, pausing more than once. No questions, just long breaths. "She may still wear white tomorrow," he said finally, "but she won't look clean anymore." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. By the time I got home, it was dusk. Aurelia sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching something on printer paper with her crayons. "What are you drawing?" I asked, setting down my bag. She held it up. 2 stick figures, one big, one little, standing in front of a building with a flag. "That's us," she said. "At court." I knelt beside her and traced the faint smile on her stick version of me. "Why court?" She shrugged. "Because that's where you go to make things right." I kissed her temple and stood. Then I walked into the kitchen, picked up the phone, and called my lawyer. "We're filing the petition," I said. "No more waiting." He didn't ask questions. Just said, "We're ready." After I hung up, I checked my email one last time before bed. There it was. A new message. No sender, no subject line, just a scan. An emergency custody revocation order. Filed that morning. It takes more than ink and arrogance to undo love. I kept repeating that sentence while holding the emergency custody order in my hands. My lawyer confirmed its validity, but also its weakness. "It's desperate," he said. "It won't hold." Still, desperation has a way of stirring noise, and noise makes headlines. The morning of the wedding arrived with forced sunlight and a breeze that didn't know which direction to commit to. People bustled around the venue, adjusting ribbons, fluffing flower arrangements. I stood quietly at the back, Aurelia's hand in mine, waiting. Malis floated down the aisle like nothing had ever fractured. All eyes on her, makeup perfect, timing perfect, posture perfect. And then, everything stopped. Aurelia let go of my hand. I thought she'd just drop a pedal or wander to the side. Instead, she ran straight down the center of the aisle, no hesitation, no fear, straight toward Malis. But she didn't stop at her. She ran past the floral arch, past the guests, and wrapped her arms around my waist. "I want to stay with you," she said, loud and tearful. "Not her." Gasps followed. Then silence, the kind that drowns a room. Malis froze at the altar. Randolph turned slowly, his eyes wide and unblinking. "You hid this from us?" he asked aloud. Cameras stopped clicking. Guests stopped breathing. Malis tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. "She's just overwhelmed. It's been a lot." "She knows exactly what she's saying," I interrupted, stepping forward. Malis opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. I pulled out the envelope from my handbag and handed it directly to Randolph's assistant, who blinked and took it with both hands. "Since I wasn't invited to speak during the vows," I said calmly, "I'll just file this instead." Inside was the formal petition, All notarized, all legal, all 6 years of proof bundled like ammunition. Filed yesterday, I added. In case love wasn't enough for some of you. The murmurs started instantly. Whispers. Disbelief. One woman stood and left. A man looked at his wife and mouthed, "Unreal." A few phones lifted, not just to take photos anymore, but to film. Melis's face crumpled at the edges. She turned to Randolph. "I can explain." "No," he said, shaking his head. "Don't." The wedding proceeded. Technically, but it wasn't a celebration anymore. It was an autopsy of a lie too well-dressed to live. Later, as people filtered out, Lois approached me. Her movements were slower than usual. She looked at Aurelia, then at me. "You really did raise her," she whispered. I nodded. Not for the spotlight, for her. Back at home, Aurelia played on the rug while I scrolled through social media. I wasn't looking for validation, but it found me anyway. A video had gone viral, captioned, "Real Mom versus Bio Mom." It showed Aurelia's outburst, Melis's frozen face, and my quiet stand at the center. The comments were relentless, and for once, they were on my side. One read, "You can't delete a mother just because she doesn't have your last name." Another, "Someone give that woman a crown and a lawyer." My phone buzzed again. It was the court clerk. "Ms. Trent, the judge has moved your hearing up. She'd like to see you next Thursday." I hung up and let the words sink in. Truth moves slower than lies, but it hits harder when it arrives. Later that night, just after I tucked Aurelia into bed, another message arrived. From Randolph. "There's something else you should see," it said. It wasn't just about the custody. People think forgiveness is weakness, but it takes more strength to walk away than to win. The morning after the wedding felt strangely quiet. Not the brittle silence of tension, but the kind that fills a house after something heavy has been carried out. The air felt lighter, like I could finally take a full breath without sharing it with someone who saw my life as their backdrop. I was halfway through folding Aurelia's laundry when I heard the doorbell. It was Lois. She stood there holding an old photo album. Not the kind Melis would have chosen. This one was messy, hand-labeled, full of sticky notes and bent pages. The one I'd made for Aurelia's 5th birthday. "I found this in the back of my closet," she said. I stepped aside. "Come in." She didn't sit. She just opened the album to a page with a Polaroid of Aurelia's first day at preschool, her clinging to my leg, both of us half asleep but smiling. "You were never temporary," Lois said quietly. I just didn't want to admit I chose the wrong daughter. I didn't speak, didn't cry, just looked at her and nodded once. "Redemption can't erase damage," I said, "but it can stop the bleeding." She nodded back and left the album on the table. Later that day, I got a text from Randolph. He and Damien were canceling the public celebration. No big announcement, no press statement, just a quiet undoing of something that had become too loud. "I'm sorry," his message read. "Not just for the event, but for believing a version of you someone else wrote." A minute later, "I respect people who carry burdens quietly, but I respect more those who speak up when they shouldn't have to." That evening, I listened to a new voicemail from Melis. "You know she was mine. You just got too attached," she said. I didn't let it finish. I deleted it. Not out of anger, but clarity. She was never mine. She was always hers. I was just the one who showed up. And that's what made all the difference. The next day, I met with the lawyer and set up a temporary shared custody structure until the court hearing. I knew it wouldn't last, but I wanted the paperwork to reflect the truth, for now. "I want one clause," I said. "Any major life decision, school, health, location, requires joint approval." The lawyer glanced up from the document. "That's not revenge." "No," I said. "That's protection." When I got home, Aurelia was painting at the kitchen table. She held up her picture, 2 women holding her hands. One had a crown, the other had bare feet. Her feet faced only one of them. "She's walking with me," I whispered. That night, the mail arrived late. A white envelope marked with the court seal. Inside, the official hearing date. It was stamped, confirmed. I folded the letter and pressed my palm against it. "Let's finish this," I said aloud. "The way it should have started. In the light." The Travis County Courthouse didn't look intimidating that morning. The sun broke just enough through the haze to cast long lines of light across the front steps. There were people pacing outside, some in heels too high for concrete, others in button-downs too stiff to breathe in. But me? I walked in steady, because it didn't feel like war anymore. It felt like truth on paper. The courtroom buzzed until the gavel dropped. Malis sat 3 seats away, her face set, jaw tight, eyes rimmed in concealer, not tears. She wore a cream blouse and a bracelet she used to borrow from my drawer when we were teens. I didn't acknowledge her. I didn't need to. Her attorney stood first. He spoke about biology, financial stability, the advantages of 2-parent households, private education funds, and structured routines. He mentioned how Malis had matured, how she wanted to reclaim her place. I counted how many times he said, "Mother." 13. When it was our turn, my lawyer didn't dramatize. He didn't insult. He laid out 6 years of evidence like a well-written history textbook. Immunization logs, school enrollments, pediatrician's notes, summer camp forms, and letters, lots of them. Some were from teachers, some from the daycare staff, and some were from Aurelia herself. A crayon-scribbled card with, "Thank you for being my forever." A class project titled My Hero, where she wrote, "My mom makes the best toast and hugs me when I have nightmares. I hope one day I can be brave like her." The judge listened without blinking. Then she looked at both of us and said only one thing. "Who do you believe the child feels safest with?" Aurelia stood, walked up to the bench, and whispered something into her ear. She didn't say it out loud, but she hugged me afterward, and that said everything. Before the final ruling, Malis stood and asked to address the court. She thanked the judge, thanked her attorney, thanked everyone who stood by me through my journey back to motherhood. She never said my name. I didn't flinch. "When someone thanks everyone except the one who held it all up," I said, "they tell you exactly who they are." I didn't need her words. I had a lifetime of actions. The gavel dropped again. "Full physical custody awarded to Ms. Delphine Trent," the judge ruled. "Supervised visitation for Ms. Rowe, contingent on psychological evaluation, no relocation permitted without joint court approval." There was a soft gasp somewhere in the gallery. Randolph closed his eyes. Damien looked down. Malis's fingers curled at her sides. My hands, they didn't shake. Before I left, I stood one more time, walked to the judge, handed over a sealed envelope. "It's from her," I said. Inside was a video clip, time-stamped months ago. Aurelia sitting in her pajamas, speaking directly to the camera. "Mommy said if I'm ever scared, I can tell a grown-up I trust. This is me telling you, please let me stay with her." The judge didn't say anything, but she nodded once, silently. The ruling stood. Outside the courthouse, the breeze carried just enough warmth to lift Aurelia's hair from her shoulders as we walked hand in hand toward the car. The envelope was still in my other hand, sealed now with more than just court tape, sealed with every quiet bedtime, every scraped knee, every note in her lunchbox. "She's not just mine on paper," I whispered to myself. "She's mine in every quiet moment no one bothered to notice." We passed Malis on the steps. She didn't look at me. I didn't look at her, because not all battles need banners. Some end in peace,